Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today's Todd McFarlane Day, so we are looking at the next issue of his Amazing Spider-Man run that I personally have in my collection. Do not have each consecutive issue, so we've been jumping around a little bit here. This issue is 323, cover dated early November 1989. The early November, or the late mention on the cover, indicia basically means that in around this time, Todd McFarlane's actually doing 2 issues of Amazing Spider-Man a month. Really burn the candles at both ends and working really hard, hitting those deadlines. So surprisingly, the artwork is still pretty top notch, although as you'll see within this issue, he has a bit of help to hit those deadlines, inking wise, right? Just want to mention this cover, pretty cool. Some examples of Todd McFarlane's kind of questionable anatomy and shifting of it, I think, on Captain America. Some of the lumpiness and stuff looks a little weird. I mean, still looks cool, but even as a kid, I remember seeing this issue before I started collecting regularly, and always thought it looked a little weird and off model for Captain America, at least, or what I'd seen of Captain America. This face is pretty good. Down here, though, I always thought this looked very odd, and I remember thinking, ew, the artist kind of messed it up, and he's got that kind of flat nose there that just is not very typical to Captain America. So like I said, this is a good example of where I think he's very off model. The face here is pretty good. We'll see how it holds up within the issue. Captain America apparently has no ass at all. Some evildoers coming in and kind of chopped out his backside or something. Just a very odd kind of look on the side here. But you know, Todd McFarlane is not known necessarily for always being anatomically correct, but he is known for creating dynamic, exciting images that we remember. And I definitely remember this cover as a kid, even before I started collecting. Kind of a miscoloring here. I think usually this is buckle colored, you know, silver, gold or something. And I definitely think it would help stuff pop out a bit. I hate those little coloring mistakes from back in the day there. Seem to be a lot of those in the 80s and 90s. So we get a splash page here. Not sure if I think this might be the actual introduction of Solo. So I wondered a few issues ago in the Larson Spider-Man reviews if Solo had been created by Larson. I guess if McFarlane's drawn him at this point, he's probably a McFarlane creation, or at least McFarlane came up with the design. If you know, I could be wrong, so if anyone out there knows any different, please let me know if you know anything about who actually created or designed Solo, because I do remember McFarlane talking about how, you know, any cool designs, he knew, you know, if he gave them to Marvel, they would just take it away from him. Obviously, he's working for the corporation. Anything he creates is then owned by them, so he kept all that stuff and would give him kind of, you know, his CD list designs for something whenever he was asked to create a new character. So Dave Michelini is the writer, Tom McFarlane is the artist, Rick Parker's lettering, and Bob Sheridan is color. It says artist here, so you can assume that he's drawing and penciling and inking, but as we move throughout the issue, I'll point out some pages where I really don't believe it's McFarlane inking, and I definitely think, as I said earlier, that he had a bit of help just to make sure he hits those deadlines. But this is the opening splash page. Makes sense that you would ink that as well. Keep that consistent McFarlane look throughout the last issues up to here, and you know, you can see a lot of his newly lines in this background here. Rare case of me seeing him using some sort of Kirby crackle, or a little bit of it anyways here, which is interesting. I don't think I've seen McFarlane use much of that. Larson does, but McFarlane not. I wouldn't associate that with him much. So these seem to be the more fun pages to draw, right? A lot of action here with Solo, some violence, even though he's doing his best. You know, I guess the colorist is doing his best not to show any kind of exit wounds or blood or anything, but it is fairly violent here. Oh, we get a little bit of blood here, surprising, right? Nice surprise there. That sounds weird. And here I feel like we're moving towards his style that we're going to get more familiar with in the regular Spider-Man series with no adjective. So he's going to be using a lot more shadows and darks and kind of creepy, horrific imagery. So I think we're getting a bit of that here. One of those funny McFarlane faces here. And all these pages definitely seem to have been inked by Todd McFarlane. Okay. So when we get to this page here, right, and probably a more boring page that he just didn't feel like inking, or, you know, if he's going to pass off pages to ink by someone else, he's not going to give them the more interesting pages. So, you know, my clues here are the lack of noodly lines. We still have McFarlane-esque faces, but inked, it seems, in a more kind of mid-80s style down here. And also this crowd, just the way this crowd is drawn here, just no indication of any kind of McFarlane lines here. Now we get some pages with Spider-Man. We get some cool Spider-Man poses. So McFarlane is inking himself on that as well. I usually like panels where the characters are kind of standing on the horizon line right at the bottom of the panel. Don't know how successful it is here. It feels like, you know, he's cut off a bit of the feet here in a weird way, and it just looks a little odd to me. Definitely some McFarlane inking on this page here. We can see all the typical, you know, hatchings and extra noodly lines and stuff. His Spider-Man is really starting to take shape here. We've obviously jumped, I think, 18 issues since the last one we reviewed, I believe, was 305. So we're starting to see now, you know, I talked about how the lines thin out for the webbing and how he'll actually bring them closer together, and there'll be just tons and tons of webbing even on the costume, right? So we're starting to see that. It's really getting close to the look he's going to use in, again, that just no adjective Spider-Man series that he's going to get a little later get to be the writer of. Here's another page where you can clearly see that is not Todd McFarlane inking, right? Looks a little funny here because it seems to have given him a, oh, what's that inbred family I forget in Spain, the royal family, the Spaniards, the Holbergs or something. If someone remembers the name, please write it in the comments. The name of that kind of inbred jaw that people get is named after them. So I feel like Spider-Man has that here. It's quite a long jaw there. So here we're back into the McFarlane ink, so we're getting the typical McFarlane Spider-Man, right? One thing that's not mentioned a lot about McFarlane doing Spider-Man, they talk a lot about more webbing, you know, the actual webbing they shoots out being what they call the spaghetti webbing, the bigger eyes, right? What they don't talk about is Spider-Man's head was always kind of drawn just as a big oval, very round, right? McFarlane, in a weird way, even though he always says, you know, I tried to make Spider-Man look more like a spider, I feel like in the contour of the mask, he did actually make it look more like there was an actual man underneath, right? You see the jawline and the chin and stuff, and I always thought that was a detail that no one really mentions about the way McFarlane interpreted, you know, the Spider-Man look. No longer is it just always an oval shape, but you actually get, you know, fairly strong chin and jawline from a masculine man's face, right? Now, here comes Captain America. This is the thing with McFarlane. Sometimes I feel like, you know, he's very successful with part of the drawing and not so much with other parts. So if I do this, I think that top part of Captain America is pretty cool, right? But then I can't imagine Captain America being in this weird goofy leg position here. It's almost like he's applying Spider-Man kind of foreshortening to Captain America, and it doesn't just quite work for me. So even if I think maybe if you took this leg out or did something different with this leg, this drawing would look a lot better. Just something funky about this one here. And again, the face looks all right here, and then all of a sudden, like, it shifts, right? McFarlane was known, we'll see later on his Spider-Man run. I remember where Wolverine guest stars. Wolverine just constantly looks different from panel to panel, whether with his mask on or not. And he's kind of doing that a little bit here with Captain America, right? Not so consistent with the faces. Small eyes, big eyes. Even the cut of the mask seems to be a little bit different, right? And here's again that weird kind of, I don't mind the big eyes, the McFarlane eyes, that's cool, but the flat nose again just looks very odd for Captain America. Spider-Man though, always very effective. There's a reason why, you know, Spider-Man had a resurgence in popularity when McFarlane was drawing him. I've talked about it before, you know, months ago when I did a review of the Spider-Man or Marvel poster book. I mean, all the images in there are from Todd McFarlane, literally. So he's, again, he becomes Marvel's, I've said this before, Marvel's marketing strategy is just using all the Todd McFarlane art for what typically, like the licensing stuff, would have been a more classic artist, maybe a more 70s, 80s looking artist. But McFarlane was popular enough where they kind of started using his stuff. So again, all the action pages and the cool pages with Spider-Man and Captain America seem to be inked by Todd McFarlane. You can tell, thin line, right? Even the contours and stuff. Always thinner than the typical inker of this period. It's a new style that some of those inkers haven't quite adapted to yet. Interesting, kind of weird explosion here. Don't see that a lot in McFarlane's work, but I kind of like it. this is kind of a McFarlane trope, this profile of someone pointing at someone else. I feel like I've seen him use this a whole bunch throughout his career. Like the idea of trying to fit Spider-Man within this, you know, there's no actual panel, but you're creating the negative illusion of a panel. I don't feel it's quite, the idea is good, but it's not quite successful. The foreshortening is a little weird, and it really does feel like he squeezed kind of Spider-Man into that panel. Kudos for trying something different though, you know what I mean? Kind of like what I mentioned when I was going over this week's Rob Liefeld comic on New Mutants is, you know, sometimes it's hit or miss, but these guys are definitely trying for stuff and trying to do different things and create their own kind of mark on comics, right? Be their own artists. They're not trying to copy anyone else. Other than when they swipe or homage stuff from like John Byrne. This kind of first shot of Sabretooth by McFarlane, again, I find is just way off model. If you didn't tell me this was Sabretooth, I would have no idea. I would probably assume it's Wolverine, right? There's a period there where those artists like Liefeld and McFarlane are kind of drawing Sabretooth's hair like a more extreme version of Wolverine's, and I think that's kind of a mistake. What was interesting, you know, Wolverine is based on a Wolverine, which is basically out of the weasel family, funny enough, and Sabretooth is, you know, out of the cat family or the feline family, right? So just making a differentiation between both as much as possible, I think, is what's important. So, you know, Sabretooth before, I think they're trying to kind of reproduce this idea of like cat's ears. But what I liked about Sabretooth is that he did have slightly pointy ears like a cat, but his hair was more like a mane, right? Like we're talking about cats and lions and things. So definitely that's what I feel works better with Sabretooth overall and is closer to his on-model look, where this looks very off-model to me. And that's the last page of this issue, 323 of The Amazing Spider-Man, written by McLean and drawn by Tom McFarlane. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, leave it in the comments below. Let me know if you have any answers to the questions I've asked during this review. If you like what I'm doing, please subscribe. Thank you so much for viewing today, guys. Stick around for the next ones, and hope everyone out there has an awesome day.
Like! Subscribe! Like! Subscribe!
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.